Hello, this is game 7 between Jan Nepomniachtchi and Ding Liren in the World Chess Championship. Jan starts with e4 and Ding plays a surprise move d6. This is one of the most exciting games, and it's one of the most exciting World Championships uh, that I've ever seen. I started following chess when Magnus was playing Anand. Um, and that was like 10 plus years ago. And Magnus won that match. It was a rocky match. I think Anand took a couple games and Magnus took a few. But since then, Magnus has been extremely boring, I guess you could say, in that he almost draws all his games. Like the World Championship itself, one of the reasons he didn't defend his World Championship is because all his games are draws. He played Karyakin, and I think Karyakin actually won a game, and then Magnus won one and beat him in Armageddon, and then Caruana, who was kind of his closest rival, um, Caruana and Magnus drew every single game. And I think that was the only time Magnus was a little bit in trouble. But apparently, at the time, Caruana just wasn't very good at fast chess. So once they moved into the tiebreaker, Magnus just kind of crushed him. And so um, I could talk forever, but I really want to show this game. Um, but a couple more things I have to mention is that Alpha Zero, the current like best chess player in the world, Google's AI, when it started to beat Stockfish, which is what we're using here. Stockfish is saying, "Hey, play d4, and then play d5." You see, this is Stockfish. Uh, it's probably a hyper-powered Stockfish. I mean, it's Stockfish 15. I don't know how much Stockfish has learned from neural nets, but basically, Google's AI has shown that this pawn structure here, which is known as the French um, pawn setup, is actually a liability to the move e5, which would create the advanced French. Like if I just show you real quick, I'm going to turn this off. If Jan goes here, black is taught to go here to immediately challenge this advanced. That's why it's called the advanced French, is because you're advancing this pawn. Because black is saying I'm only putting my pawn out one square, so and then I'm playing this pawn two squares, so I'm just letting you take this. Now you don't want to challenge it like here, because you're opening up your king, and then the queen can come out. Um, white can maybe take, and then this pawn maybe is a little bit of a liability. It's kind of a target. Um, it's just not the idea. So basically, the idea is to play over here because the queen getting out is much better than the king getting attacked, basically. So anyway, black is taught to go this way, and then white can try to defend like this, and you get this tension here, and then black will typically take, or black will bring its queen to b6 and then pressure this while threatening here. And then if there's ever, like, let's say queen out here and white decides to take here, which sometimes you have to do because it's actually really hard to maintain this pawn wall. If black is just hell bent on getting around it, it's actually really hard to maintain. I lose a lot of games as white because I'm not Alpha Zero in the advanced French. So, but what I'm trying to say, the whole point of what I'm trying to say is that objectively, between supercomputers, the French is lost. Like it's actually one of the debunked openings or defenses where white can get a good game, get an advantage basically by force. But anyway, black has very simple play here. Um, it's very easy for black to develop and get a good game. Um, but anyway, if you're a supercomputer, you can hold on to this pawn. You can utilize the space advantage, all this space that you're getting behind it. Um, if you're a supercomputer, you can make it work. As a human being, I've found that it's extremely hard to play this move e5 and justify it, because if something goes wrong, like if suddenly you make an inaccurate move over here and black, like let's say you make another stupid move and another stupid move, suddenly black has all these pieces and can win this pawn. And then if you can't, now this pawn is dropping too, do you see? So anyway, um, that's one of the interesting things that the cutting edge of supercomputer chess has shown. That's why it's a fascinating decision by Ding. It's basically a surprise attack, him playing d6. Um, it's a huge surprise because you're playing something that is objectively worse at this point in the history of chess. But he has some new ideas, and he's also trying to throw Nepo off. And Nepo plays d4, which is the best reply. You could also look at moves like this, just immediately taking advantage. But that's not the best. Considered best is d4 because it's basically saying if you're going to play passively with e6, I get a huge white center. But black immediately lashes back. And now there's this very cool move here, knight d2, that Nepo plays quickly. Knight d2 is a fascinating move because when I play chess as like or I should say played as an intermediate player, when I saw this pawn structure against this setup, I just think to myself, okay, well, I'm going to develop my knight to the most aggressive square. And now I get to defend this pawn because it's under attack. So if takes, I take. Now, the other way to do this is to go here, and if takes, you take. And it doesn't matter where you were, it just matters where you're going. So what's the difference between knight d2 and knight c3? Well, the main difference is if the purpose of the knight is solely to guard this pawn, then it's actually better on d2 serving that purpose because it allows the move c3. The knight doesn't block your own pawn, which fortifies this pawn, which then fortifies like in the future if black plays incorrectly. Now moves like this start to make sense because um, let's say black gets scared and goes all the way back. Back here is actually a good move, but in this position, white has the move c3 to kind of really take to get this going. Um, Whereas the knight kind of blocks that. So that's kind of the meta of knight d2. It's a hard move to understand, but it's kind of just it's pretty cool. Like I tend to play it because like if I'm gonna end up here, I'd rather get there from d2 because it's just one of those fascinating things that apparently is slightly better than knight c3. Now knight c3 is also equally good, but um, Nepo played knight d2 for a reason. There are pros to this move. So basically you're reserving your c pawn, and yeah, it's just kind of cool. Okay, so now let's go back to the game. We have e4, e6, d4, d5, knight d2. Now in this position, it gets really interesting really fast. So c5 is immediately played, and this is basically mandatory. So if you're going to play the French at all and allow white to potentially get space on the king side and an attack on the king side, you better thrust your c pawn forward and start undermining the center and getting your queen, knight, and bishop into the party. Okay, so c5 immediately makes perfect sense, protected by the bishop. White is not going to take that because that would only help black start to castle by getting his bishop developed. Okay, so white actually plays knight f3, and then another beautiful thing about knight d2 that I prefer to knight c3 is that now when Ding, basically c5 is almost always followed with c takes d4. Why? Because the d pawn is more valuable than the c pawn, and that's one of the strengths of the Sicilian defense, as well as the French, as well as many other defenses. The main idea of black's defenses is often trading the c pawn for the d pawn and then using his two center pawns and claiming equality or an advantage, basically. So black immediately takes. White has made a couple knight moves and a couple pawn moves, and black has simply made four pawn moves, one capture and three pawns out. Now white here takes the pawn with the knight on f3, which is why after c5 we have knight f3. And the nice thing is, in this position, after the knight takes, which is the obvious move, right? Because you just lost a pawn, so you better get it back. So you get it back, and now this knight can actually replace this knight's duties on f3, because the f3 knight is a good piece. The knight on c3 is not as good as f3 because the c pawn is useful to attack with, whereas the f pawn is useful to stay there as shelter for your king in most situations. So this move is interesting. Black is basically just, exchanging the c pawn and starting to develop the king side. So the bishop has some activity on this diagonal and is ready to come out, and then the knight is out, and black is going to castle in this direction because he has no safety on the queen side, generally speaking. And black is also piling up on this white pawn with his two pieces. All right, and white is defending it once. So again, you don't want to play a move like f3 because it's just ugly. You're opening up your king to danger from this queen. It looks like nothing now, but it becomes a problem later in the game, and if you do play recklessly like that. So here, white just removes his weakness by taking. Now, when he takes, black can take back in three different ways. If it's me, I'd probably take with the knight. And Ding agrees. Ding takes with the knight. The reason I say that is if you take with the pawn, you're opening up your king to all this space. So moves like queen e2 come with check potentially. That's one reason not to do that. Basically, the long-term thinking chess reason not to take it is because your pawn structure would be 1, 2, 3, 1, and 2. And this 1, like if you take here, this pawn is going to be a target for moves like bishop g2 after g3, and this pawn is hit. The knight does a good job just controlling around it, preventing the pawn from moving, which makes it a target. If a pawn is isolated, can't move forward because it's all isolated and blockaded. Isolated meaning no pawns can defend it. There's no e pawn or c pawn to defend it. This pawn would be a liability, and white can chip away at it and force black into passivity. And I wonder what the computer says, if it agrees with me. Oh, well, I played g3. That was just an example. But, so in this position, Pawn takes, it's like losing half a pawn or losing 0.7. It's thinking about it. But basically, we're in an equal position here if you take with the queen, and the knight is like, you know, zero point 0.2. But taking with the queen, the computer has balls of steel. But now, if you let it think long enough, it sees that the knight is the best move, and that's equal. Yeah. But the computer's initial reaction is taking with the queen. You can do that because there's no easy knight to c3 attacking the queen. But take with the knight. Generally speaking, knights need to move multiple times to be good. But the queen is pretty good from where she is. So take with the knight. Um, let's get back into the official game. Plug this bad boy in. Computer's already overheating. That's why I gotta turn off the analysis. This game is way too crazy to let a computer bite on it. So anyway, after the knight takes, so generally speaking, just the knight is better. Okay, queen is also good, and then pawn is the worst. The reason pawn's the worst is because it becomes a target. Whereas if you take with the queen or the knight, this pawn island is very healthy, and so is this one. And you don't have any targets. It's all about weaknesses in your position. Um, so you don't want to do that unless you have a reason. So here, knight f3 is played, knight d to f3. Obviously, if you move this knight to f3, you're kind of retreating, whereas this is kind of reinforcing your center. And here, Ding plays his bishop to here. There's a lot of options here, like the knight out, or the bishop out, or maybe the queen developing, or the bishop out to a more aggressive square. But bishop e7 is good because it's pretty useful behind this pawn because it's shielding itself from frontal attacks as well as the king. And now if the queen moves, maybe the pawn can take without something here. I don't know. It's basically threatening to come out in multiple directions. It's giving the king space to castle. It's just a good move. Um, Even though it's not too ambitious. Now this move I really don't like. Bishop c4 is played. Now bishop c4. So this is where I feel like white goes wrong. I think white is attacking the French defense nicely here. But bishop c4 is not good, in my opinion. It's definitely okay. But the good news about it is you're getting ready to castle. Logical to develop your bishop. The bad news is you're what I call biting a rock. So when you have a pawn structure like this with multiple pawns in a diagonal, it's actually the very worst place to put your bishop. Because if this bishop sits on this diagonal, like goes back here, or stays here, and just looks in this direction all game, he's never really gonna be able to attack f7, which is normally the strength of c4 of bishop c4 is that the pawn's on e5 and you actually are pressuring f7, so the knight hops actually combine with the bishop. But in here, that's just never going to happen really, because black has no plans of pushing these anytime soon, especially with the bishop here. But it's an aggressive square. Maybe there's some chances to, at the right moment, kill the knight, but bishops are a little bit better, so you're not going to do that willingly. And here, black plays a great move. The reason, again, where I would put it is d3 because it's useful on this diagonal. If the king is going to castle here, then this pawn can be weak. This queen can come out in conjunction with the bishop, and this knight. It's just a little bit better here. The downside of d3 is you are blocking your own protection of the knight from your queen. So then this knight, assuming this knight moves, this queen actually could maybe be attacking your knight. That's the only downside I see to this move. But your knight on f3 protects your knight. You can always play the move c3. Um, I don't know. Not such a big deal. Um, Again, I'm just gonna real quick check the computer. Yeah, bishop d3 top move. So I'm not crazy. That's good. All right. So I was right about that. So bishop c4 is played. But maybe Jan has a reason, right? But I just think it's just a poor move, just a bad move. And now black is in the driver's seat. So black goes here and um, is putting more pressure on this knight and also daring white to take. If white takes, black has to take back with the pawn, and then that pawn will be an isolated pawn. And if I'm white here, I actually wouldn't take. I would not take. I would play. I mean, I'm nowhere near as good as either of these players. This is the top level. One of the reasons I'm making this recap is because of the brilliancy on both sides of this game, and it's just one of the most amazing games I've ever seen. But if I'm white, I don't like this capture because black, although the pawn is isolated, his whole position revolves around this knight in the center. And if black has a pawn and a pawn supporting the knights, then there's really no idea of bishop takes because the pawn will retake and be protected by a pawn. And there's just, it's like the Great Wall of China, like you're never getting through. Um, so I guess if it's me and I'm white, I would maybe castle, maybe um, maybe c3 um, with ideas of queen out, or maybe even moving the knight back, or just letting it stay here and daring black to take because threatening to bring your queen out, maybe hitting here, right? Or maybe you take with the other knight and that would just be an improvement. Maybe bishop here is an option if not for the threat of knight taking. So maybe drop the bishop back, play a pawn move, hit this knight, make it hop back, and then bring your bishop out here. But maybe before all that, I'll castle, something like that. But anyway, Nepo just takes. Not the worst move in the world, but um, basically what I'm saying is it's not good enough. No, like getting this pawn to take back. Ding volunteered for this, and white is not winning yet. Is how I should put it. And if anything, I like black here because this pawn capture. It's all about being fast and having no weaknesses, right? But it's about multiple things. It's about um, speed of development as well as um, piece quality as well as pawn structure. Um, this bishop can now come out on either of these two squares, most likely b7, and from there it bears down on the king if it castles, and it also you don't have to waste the move playing g3 because you've already got that pawn out of the way. This bishop is a piece that doesn't really have a home on d7, and it kind of wants to be on b7. So the fact that we've played this move is good because now black can make this move whenever he wants and have long-term pressure, and then the idea of c5 at the right moment um, opens up your bishop, and good luck stopping c5. Um, you just can't. So black is gonna get that bishop in the game, and anyway, it's supporting this knight. So black or white here castles. After damaging the structure, white castles. And Nepo is basically saying, you played the French defense. I knew how to, knight d2, like the very strange move. But then we exchanged, and this is the beauty of this game is that there are basically no other exchanges. They basically play a full, perfect game like this with these pieces. And when you play a chess game and there's only one exchange, a knight for a knight, um, and it brought an imbalance in the position where the bishop is improved, but the pawn structure is not, this is one of the most interesting, hard to calculate, sharp games uh, you can possibly get. Um, World Chess Championship, classical World Championship level chess was thought to be kind of a draw and boring, but this has been 4 decisive games in a row going into this game. And this is a 5th decisive game, but I won't give it away if you don't know who won until the end. So black here can castle or can play bishop b7, and he chooses to castle. So a lot of the times in Grandmaster chess, when one guy castles, the other guy does too. And now let's play, right? So now white is never really taking here, especially with the double defense. So, like, if you take here, that's a terrible move because then pawn takes, and then black's structure is solved. Um, and you've lost a bishop and given them a bishop pair. But anyway, so white actually develops the queen to d2. Now, this is a very professional move because you're basically getting the queen out of the way of your rooks connecting. Now the bishop is still in the way of the rooks connecting, but we are still in the opening phase. Development is not complete until this bishop gets into the game, and by moving the queen to d2 instead of e2, you're not blocking your own bishop. Like queen d2 is just a kind of a bad move because the bishop can't get out, and maybe you go here and try to get it out this way. But generally speaking, one move at a time, and this move is good because the bishop is still able to see. The knight has no attack on the queen hopping in here because of the bishop's vision. So bishop b7 is played, long-term pressure on the king, very strong piece for black because this pawn blocking it you can control and move at any time, and you can't really play moves like b4 trying to like somehow block that because black controls b4 twice. Okay, and it's not worth that fight anyways because black can always sacrifice the pawn just to open up the bishop, which is highly advisable if you had to do it because this pawn does not belong right in front of the bishop. Okay, so now white correctly realizes that his bishop is bad on this diagonal and moves it to this diagonal. That is a very practical decision, and that's why I think bishop c4 was so bad, is because if you were gonna, why did you develop your bishop out to c4 and then put it back on d3? Why not just save time by going straight to d3 in the beginning? But anyway, at least Nepo realized, hey, I'm actually better back here, and that's the best move. And sometimes the best move in chess is to just realize that your piece is not optimally placed and just shift it a little bit. So great move from Nepo. Now Ding plays a great move, queen c7. This is excellent because you're defending your bishop and you're attacking the king, you're connecting your rooks, and you are fighting for the f4 square. So now like in this position, if I'm playing with black, I'm trying to make knight f4 work, because if it does, it comes with an attack on the queen and the bishop, and if you save one, I kill the other. And if I can exchange my knight for your bishop, I'll be better, because the black bishops can hang out back here, and this pawn can go forward, and then the queen can, join in, and long term, those bishops are going to be a pain in the ass for white. Um, that's my little strategy. I'm not as good as these guys, but that's what I would be thinking. And Ding's kind of thinking the same thing, because now he's threatening the knight here, and you can either take with the bishop, and then the queen will take if the knight's here, or you lose your other bishop. So knight f4 wins one of the bishops, but not anymore, because white plays queen e4. Now, queen e4, yes, it controls the f4 business I'm talking about. It also steps out of the thing I'm talking about. But more importantly than that, it's actually an attack on the king, and it's threatening checkmate in one. So queen e4. This is world championship chess. Black's playing a French defense. All the previous games have been decisive, except for, I think, maybe 2 draws total. Game 1 and Game 3. All other games have been decisive. And we're on Game 7. And it's 3-3. And white's just going for black's throat here. Now, to play chess like this, to just, like a bullet game, like just try to checkmate, like maybe black won't see it, and then boom, you win. This is one way to play. However, in the highest level of chess, generally speaking, you don't just go for a attack like this, because if black plays, a move like g6, stopping checkmate, well, now your queen is in the middle, and black may be, after a move like c5, he's one knight move away from attacking you with the bishop, and that's why the queen is useful defending the bishop. So, not, it doesn't always work. I guess what I'm trying to say is sometimes it's better to have like some sort of slow attack. Sometimes an obvious attack is still the best attack. Like chess is not, it's not about deception. It can be. It can be like maybe you make a move that it has some trickery to it. Absolutely. Like where you make them think you're doing one thing, but really you're doing another. But very rarely. Basically, you want to just play the best moves. And this is a good move, because even if black defends, which black does, with the knight hopping back, now the knight defends h7 and attacks the knight. But now white swings over to h4, because the knight blocks the bishop's control of h4. So white swings over here bravely, maintaining the attack on h7. So Nepo turned one attack into a redeployment of his queen with the same attack. And now the knight is stuck defending this. And it doesn't want to be, because it wants to move so that the bishop can attack the queen. But if you try to move right now, that's just checkmate. That's just GG. So this knight is actually stuck. That's why g6 is a little bit better. If you're wondering why g6 is not played, it's because of moves like bishop h6, because g6 no longer controls h6. And then the rook has to move, and that's not the end of the world, but if you can avoid it, it's worth doing. But anyway, it's kind of a passive move to retreat the knight instead of just playing f6 and I mean g6 and f5 eventually. So we get this position with queen on h4, and you can see the life of the game, which is basically these two bishops are facing the direction of the king, and then these pieces are facing the king, and maybe this bishop can come out, uh, but it's already attacking the queen, kind of. And you just can kind of see that what's happening. Like, it's not an opposite side castling game, but it feels like it because the black king is one move away from being checkmated. So although black isn't stupid and isn't gonna blunder checkmate, it's still difficult because you're kind of neutering this knight on f6. And the queen is actually felt on the h file. And it's not a liability in the middle. It's kind of safe over here, and it's exerting pressure. And white is definitely for choice here, in my opinion, in this position. But now black plays actually the only move. So in this position, when I say white's better, it's because black is playing on a razor's edge, and this entire game is played on a razor's edge, where if you don't play c5, opening up tactical threats on this knight, opening up the white king, if you don't make the white king feel the hot water, then this black king is going to be taken advantage of, basically. So c5 improves the bishop on b7. Now, it also opens up a threat in the future of c4, dislodging this important bishop. This white bishop is obviously teaming up with the queen, and that is the focal point of white's attack. Now, you can also play moves like knight g5 and maybe, take here. And then if you have three pieces, taking there, the knight and the king are not sufficient. So that's another idea. But here, white plays a great move, bishop f4. I'm trying to think why don't you play this? It's probably because of h6. Yeah, that's why. Okay, gotcha. So in this position, instead of c5, if you play a move like h6, basically being stubborn and saying, I don't like that attack on my king, I'm just going to play h6, and now your queen has no action because my g-pawn protects that, so haha. Well, that loses to bishop takes h6, because now when you take back, the queen takes back, and this queen is very strong. So you've exchanged a bishop for two pawns and a queen right next to a king. That's more than enough compensation than a pawn. So in this position, white is going to be winning because the threat of the rook coming around and checking the king is going to be too hard to manage. And you, even if you get your rook away, you still can never run the king out, and you also can't really attack this queen effectively, because as soon as you move the knight, it's actually checkmate. So this knight's paralyzed. The queen is looking to collect the rent money, as Gotham Chess would say. So you can't play h6. You have to play dynamically. You have to fight fire with fire. You can't just defend this position with black, or you will die. So c5, attacking the knight. Nepo needs to move the knight. Otherwise, the bishop can take the knight, and when the pawn takes, the king gets vulnerable, because then maybe you can play the queen in and take the pawn and come back and defend or something, stuff like that. So anyway, this in-between move is bishop to here. Oh, and again, the knight wants to move. It can't go here because the pawn would kill it. It can't go here because the queen would kill it. And it can't go here because if you play here trying for an obvious full attack, now h6 does work because the knight actually prevents its bishop from capturing the pawn, and now the knight actually has no good moves here. Like, what are you gonna do if you take here, and like then try to sacrifice? It doesn't quite work. Um, like I don't even know, but I know that this doesn't. It's not as good. And if the knight goes back, well then it's black's turn and black can take. And then if you try to take, um, maybe white goes back, and the difference is I've won a knight and you've only won a pawn. So anyway, you have to play. You have to move the knight, and it doesn't belong anywhere forward. And if you go back, you're blocking your own bishop. And if you go back here, you're blocking your rook. You're also retreating a shotgun. I like to call knights shotguns. So you don't want to back up with a shotgun. You want to move forward, but you can't. So you throw this in between move, developing your bishop, protected by the queen, attacking the queen. And black cannot take your knight here because you are attacking the queen. Now the queen has to move, or you have to block with the bishop. You can't block with the pawn because the knight can take that, or the bishop. So black moves the queen. Now queen d8 is possible, but that's a weird move because you're walking into rook d1, and then ideas like bishop takes h7 with check, and then you win the queen. But bishop d8 is possible. I mean, queen d8 is possible with the idea of pairing up with the bishop and attacking this queen, kind of. I don't really know, but I just know that's a move. But anyway, queen comes out here, which makes more sense, attacking this pawn and getting out of the attack of the bishop and still bearing down on f2, with ideas of c4 at some point. So now this is a very clever way to deal with this pressure on this knight, is to bring your bishop out, force the queen to move, and now you've won control. Like, what's the point of attacking the queen and getting it to move here? Well, now this square is available. It's real estate you've won for your knight. So now the knight comes in. So now, again, I would say white is winning because white has 4 pieces bearing it down on the king, and the rooks are not going to be far off. Maybe the f-pawn moves. White is doing well here. Now black is still hanging on by a razor's edge with this knight defense, but black does have some serious firepower on these diagonals, and it's not so simple. So that's why I like this game so much, is because there's not a lot of exchanges other than that one knight exchange, and the rest of the game is just trying to like attack each other with all your pieces. And when you have all these pieces in an attack, the possibilities and the variations that are going through the players' minds who can calculate it all, kind of, it's just mind-blowing what this evolves into. So black here plays rook a to d8, again an only move to stop this these types of attacks. The reason this is a good move is because your rook isn't doing anything on a8. The king is all the way over here, so pushing this pawn and like going all the way down here and keeping this rook here is kind of pointless. So you might as well move it out here. You leave this rook here, protecting your king's pawn right here because of ideas we'll see later, where when the queen's on h3 and a rook's on here, you can actually sack here and then take here. I know it looks crazy right now. That's far down the line, but that's what Ding is thinking about in terms of which rook do I put on d8. The a1 is worse than the f1. The f1 has the f rook has a purpose, whereas this pawn is not important as much as the king pawn. So anyway, that's why he plays this rook out here. Now this is a good move because it attacks the bishop. That means that if the bullets start flying and white, maybe knight needs to take a rook or something, it will be able to after the move rook takes bishop, because when rook takes bishop, um, the checkmate threat is no longer available on h7. So although you're giving up a rook for a bishop, your knight is then able to move. So this move actually helps the knight and helps the king by threatening to kill the white bishop. Um, Also, there are ideas of rook down to d4 attacking the queen and the bishop laterally. Um, it's not a threat yet because if you come there, the bishop blocks the attack, and you can play a move like c3 and attack the rook. And the rook can't win the bishop because the knight defends the bishop. So, white here, I mean, what should white do? White has a pawn hanging, but doesn't really care because he's just going for the throat. Um, Moves like g4 and g5 don't really work because you're kind of just making your light squares around your king weaker, and this bishop and queen could become an issue. Um, so white plays the move rook a to, whoop, what did I just do? Right, white plays the move, a very strange move, rook a to e1. It's strange because 99% of chess players would move the rook to d1 because black just brought their rook out to the d file. So why am I not doing the same? Well, Nepo's like, I'm going to bring it to e1 because I don't care about your sacrifice here and recapturing with the rook. I'll take back with the pawn or the knight, and I want my rooks here because maybe a move like c4 later attacking the bishop, opening up on f2 is a problem if there's a knight in one of these situations, or if maybe the bishop swings out and there's counterplay on f2. So white is saying, I'll keep this pawn. Also, white might be considering, this is why, like, this game is fascinating from this point forward, because now white has to justify this stupid rook on f1. Because a rook that cannot move is vulnerable to a bishop attack. Like if white just goes in, let's say black goes here and white goes here and black runs away. These are bad moves, but I'm just saying, let's say chess starts happening. Now a move like you know a move like bishop to here is suddenly very potent because this rook has a hard time not dying. So anyway, in the game we have the rook trapping its other rook. Now you have to play the move f5 in these positions to justify your rook, because if this rook, if this file never opens, this rook being trapped here sucks. Whereas if this rook goes here, at least this rook can go here, and you can keep the f file closed and just use your f rook on the e file. But by playing rook a to e1, it's just strange unless you know that you're moving this bishop and maybe like taking somewhere and playing f4. And maybe like moves like king h1 to get out of this diagonal. Anyway, rook a to e1. Who am I to judge? Nyan, he's a great player. He might become the world champion. Maybe it'll be Ding though, because Ding is no joke. Ding plays g6. G6 weakens the knight, weakens h6, but it does blunt this bishop, and now the knight is free to maybe move, and then this bishop will attack the queen. So that is the plus of g6. It is one of the best moves, probably the best. And now white plays bishop to here, anticipating a discovered attack. You know, any knight move is scary on this queen, but best is here defending the bishop. Otherwise, you drop your bishop. But anyway, white anticipates this and moves here, and now the queen is not under attack if the knight moves. In fact, white has a very unstoppable attack on this knight, and if the knight moves, even if it moves somewhere where it's defending the knight, white can play bishop takes bishop. So just to show you simple chess, white can just take and has one apiece. So this threat is very real. That's why it must be disrupted. Ding only played g6 because he knew that this is not a real thing to be worried about because he has the resource rook d4 attacking the queen, and the queen cannot maintain this diagonal. It's under attack, so you don't have time to take the knight. So you have to move the queen back. The queen chooses to go to h3, maintaining long-term pressure on the h file and h7. And it's actually very good on h3 because of sacrifices on f2. If this rook comes out, like in this position, if you are black, this is what I was talking about earlier when it made no sense, but now you'll see. If you are black, you might think that in this position, white, you just attacked the queen has retreated, your bishop is no longer in trouble, your knight's no longer in trouble. You might think, I'm going to move this rook over here and double up rooks on this bishop. And then maybe I play a move to get the bishop out of the way, and then I come down here or something. I don't know. I'm just going to get this rook into the game because I'll control the center, and maybe I don't like this knight hopping in some situations. I don't know. I'm just going to go here because I don't need to defend this. My king defends this. I'll be fine. So let's go here, right? Well, if black goes here, this shows the complications of this game. So in this game, we have two pawns that have been exchanged, and only one piece is missing from the party. Like you have two rooks, a queen on each side. You have bishop pairs on each side. So all the long-term snipers, I mean, look at all the influence that all these pieces have, like all the squares that they're controlling. The queen can take on b2, the queen can go over here. You know, there's all these moves to consider. Both sides have a knight for those tactical shots, and all their snipers. So, you know, very fascinating. But if rook here, white wins immediately with knight to here. And this is a very common sacrifice if you're good, but very hard to see for a beginner. And basically, it's just game over. Because after knight takes here, you have busted open the king's defenses. And if the king takes you, there is the move queen. Oh, you know what? Actually the queen defends here. So it might not work. But you could still play moves like, I mean, I don't know. Basically, if the queen was in here, this would work because the rook and the queen team up on this. So that's just one of the things you have to pay attention to, because that knight move would attack the rook and undermine this pawn. Okay? Doesn't work in this position. So the queen actually goes back here. I'm probably getting some of this analysis wrong, but this is just a crazy game. So why did Ding go back? I think he went back to pressure this knight as well as get behind this pawn. So c4 is a threat, and then also to defend his bishop so that the knight can move to h5, blocking the queen, and then if the bishop takes bishop, queen can just take bishop. So this is a good move. I'm gonna real quick check, just because I spent some time talking about it. I'm gonna check if there's a huge thing wrong with this move. B3. B3 prevents C4. We'll see that in the game. But rook E3. Yeah, bishop C4. The immediate justification is bishop C4, it looks like to me, because now this threat is very real. And if black just plays a passing move, see how knight takes f7 is crushing? Because if you take the knight, we have rook takes here. The queen is attacked, and the queen can't take because the bishop and the queen would take like that. So that is why Ding didn't play the obvious looking move. Instead, he plays this brilliant move, keeping equality and, just an improving queen move. And here, white has to deal with the threats against his own bishop because now this knight can move. And this rook is really well placed, helping out vertically and horizontally. This rook is, like I said, doing its job. This bishop is a god, and this bishop is defended by the queen. Not too shabby. Very important piece because black's dark squares around the king are Swiss cheese without this bishop alive. So white here plays b3. Seeing the move c4 in some tactical variations where white is going all in for the attack, um, in some like for example, if white plays the move c3 instead of b3, b3 is a defensive move, defending against this so the bishop gets to kind of stay there. But if white gets greedy and plays c3 attacking this rook, the rook has nowhere to go where it can stay alive except maybe all the way over there, kind of out of the fight. I mean, that's kind of an interesting move, but maybe it goes back. Um, there's situations where, oh, fuck, I think I gotta use the computer. It gets so complicated. What if rook a4? I'm just curious. It's saying bishop b5, but I think there's situations where if black, well, maybe white could do that. Rook e2. What about queen here? Knight d5. Oh, knight d5 defends the bishop. Yes, that doesn't work. Anyway, if you want super accurate analysis, watch Hikaru's analysis. There was a situation where c3 was considered instead of b3, but in some of those lines, there is the move c4, distracting this bishop, and this bishop is actually lost because it can't go here and it can't go here. The pawns control here, and the knight and the bishop control here. So even though the rook controls it there, if right now, if instead of b3, white moves the bishop here, it's actually just lost. Let me get rid of these. Because of black just has plenty of attackers there. So the bishop has no access on in this way. And if you imagine there's a pawn here defended by the queen, and the bishop is under attack, it can't go this way, it can't go this way, and it can't go this way. So it goes this way, and if the bishop goes back this way, um, it's blocking white's own rook, and the queen would actually win the knight. So this is I would say this is a tactically rich game. The tactics are plentiful. There's a surplus of things to calculate. And that is look at the time. It says 25 to 1 hour. I don't know how accurate that is, but I do know Ding gets in time trouble later. But basically, it is very hard to play this position accurately because of things to consider, like what if I play c3 and he plays c4, and after retreating the rook, and then what if the bishop has to come here and then the queen takes the knight. It's just hard to calculate. I'm not going to show you all the exact perfections of the situation, like the perfect analysis. I'm just going to kind of illustrate the dynamics of the tactical richness. So anyway, Jan sees into the future and plays b3 and says, now there's never a c4. My bishop can permanently be annoying. Now there are all sorts of ideas, like the knight and the bishop can both sacrifice on here, and then if this pawn ever takes back, the queen again can slam in here and start winning pieces with check. So maybe I should show that. So yeah, computer says c3 is the top line. And then rook d5. Yeah, rook d5 is good because it x-rays the bishop. So sacrifices with the knight here drop the bishop. Anyway, it doesn't work here, but that you have to be paying attention to these types of situations. But anyway, there's a line where white is completely winning, but black has this move c4 that disrupts the bishop and just ruins everything. So that's why Nepo plays b3. Okay, let's move on. Black now takes control by playing knight h5. That's why, technically speaking, it's better to play c3, because at least the rook is under attack and has to retreat. Not to there, because the knight would take it, but to here, or like I was showing earlier, going after the pawn. Ding never actually makes a move on these pawns because he's too nervous about his king and this queen threatening the king. So black plays knight to here, threatening knight in here, and also revealing a tension between these two bishops. This bishop is completely hanging. So white has to do something about that. If white takes the bishop, black can take back, and now this bishop, you see again, is very strong. This bishop, on the contrary, is blunted, and then white will have some difficulty hopping in here just because this queen is helping, and the king can always kind of hide, and the knight's kind of blunting the queen. So the queen and the bishop are really not as scary as they used to be, and black is threatening to come in here protected by the rook, and this rook doesn't influence that because this pawn is in the way, And so there's a bunch of problems with white's position there, kind of. So that is why Jan plays the move f4 that I said before he has to play. So now you see this game evolving, getting even more beautiful, because now white has the double barrel shotgun here, the double barrel the double cannon. I don't know what to call it because these are long range pieces, but we got a double barrel rifle of some kind. Anyway, we'll call it the double barrel shotgun, even though I like to think of these as, I guess, sawed off shotguns, and this is the double barrel shotgun. But these things are coming to life, and now we have justified rook a to d1 because, or to e1, because now we have a rook on f1 that is has ideas of coming into the game, or you can just continue to play this pawn. Now, Ding's structure is superb here. You cannot ever really play f5 because black will take back while being protected by a pawn. So that doesn't work. But at least you're defending your bishop. So now if black takes, you can take back. And this, again, is a super complicated position because now it's black to move, and this knight is under attack by the queen, and you know this knight can come in, and now you're threatening to win this bishop, which was a pain in your ass basically. You're also threatening the queen, and if the queen comes up here, the queen is trying to checkmate here by maybe still checkmate on h7 by playing knight g4 and then knight into f6. So f6 looks like a bit of a weakness. Also, there are these crazy ideas where there are some positions where the queen is here and it's actually pressuring this rook, and then the sacrifices start to work because like let me just illustrate a point. Let's just say this knight was all the way over there, just because I don't have time to calculate the exact variation. If white gets its queen in here, there are, let's just keep being stupid with black. There are moves like this that you cannot take back with this pawn because this would be checkmate. Because this f rook has come to life. So that is all. The reason the f rook has come to life is if you take this bishop. So if you take this bishop, these bishops are staring at each other. White doesn't want to take, and black is thinking about taking. But if black takes, black has to worry about this rook coming to life and this queen converging here because of sacrifices here, and this pawn being insufficient to guard because you know, if the bishop sacks and you don't take, or like you've already taken the knight and then you don't take this way because the queen is too strong, well, then the bishop is sitting here and the queen just checkmates you on h7. So very hard to deal with. So Nepo or Ding doesn't take. Now, before I move on, I'll show you the real line. Go back. If you take and white takes back, and you play knight f4, the queen probably hops into h. Oh wow. So it wants to sack the rook for the knight. But let's say hypothetically you go up here trying to deliver checkmate by, if you hop here with check and the king has to move here, then the queen can checkmate on h7. So that's, let's say that's your plan. Well now, wow, black plays c4. And now let's say let's say white is saying, well, I'm one move away from checkmate, so let me just try to checkmate, right? Has black made a horrible mistake by taking here and allowing all this? Well, black here plays f5. Yes, that's the key move. Yeah. f5 saves the day because now the queen controls h7. The rook is no longer, under attack in any situation because these pawns defend the f file. And then also, if en passant, this loses because your bishop is actually, you've been ignoring the fact that your bishop is going to die. So just taking the bishop wins the game. So you can't take en passant. More forcing is knight in with the check, with the idea of if the king moves, you can checkmate by taking this rook here. Okay, but what, and black can't go here because you would take this with checkmate, and the knight actually prevents the king from escaping with the queen. And you're also winning the queen on c7, but it's checkmate more importantly. So that means that when the knight hops in here, black has to take it with the rook. And then if white takes, it looks like white is maybe, won the exchange and is delivering mate. But again, you're dropping your bishop, and the queen is there to defend. And you have no more attacking pieces. And what's interesting is your only option here is to sack the pawn because the king can't take because you would blunder your queen. This is what I mean by like, this is so advanced. Like you have to realize this is so advanced. Like you're basically, you have to calculate, what if he tries to kill my bishop and I, you know, try to gallop my knight in, and then he sacks the rook for the knight. It's like so exciting. Then you play f7 to threaten getting a queen with checkmate. It's also check, and if the king moves, it's checkmate in multiple ways. So the queen has to defend and comes and takes, but now the queen from here is defending the knight from the rook and the queen, which is also defended by the rook. You see what I'm saying? So it's extremely complicated. So black actually takes here and then loses the knight. So rook takes f4. And if you take, white can take back. And now we have a queen and a bishop versus a queen and a rook. But it's black to move, and black takes this pawn. And if you try to stop it, well, black actually comes in and defends it. And now black is better because the pawn is very strong here. So even though white has a rook and black only has a bishop, black's up a pawn and actually two pawns, and one of the pawns is super strong. So black's going to probably win that game. But that's assuming white sacks its bishop trying to go for checkmate, and then black sacrifices back. And none of this even happens. But that's what's so crazy is these players have to calculate. That's why, black saw the danger of the threats and didn't see, didn't see everything and decided to play the safer move, I would say, bishop over here. This is still a devastating attack from black, but it's not opening up this rook as much, and it's just avoiding some of those complications. So here, white's knight is defended by a pawn and a rook, and it's attacked by a queen and a bishop. So is that what's happening, or is black merely just dodging the exchange and also not doing that? We don't know. It's a crazy freaking game. So here, white takes the opportunity to play c3 finally, attacking this rook. And this bishop has actually stopped this rook from being able to retreat. So where does the rook go? If you take the bishop, the knight can take back. There's a lot of things going on. This pawn defends the knights. Um, and then the knight is attacked twice. So this knight over here attacks this pawn in conjunction with this rook. So this rook is unprise, they call it. It's under attack, but black takes this pawn. And you might think, why? You're under attack by a pawn. Like, your rook is gonna die. Why are you taking a pawn with your knight? Well, it's because you're attacking a queen. And the white doesn't have time to kill the rook, because then black would take the queen with check and it would be game over. Like this. So something like this where black has a queen and white doesn't. So is black winning a pawn here? What's going on? Well, why can black even take here? Because it's only defended by a rook, and it's defended twice by white pieces. So isn't the knight dying? So yes, your rook didn't die, but now your knight's going to die just for a pawn. Why is black doing that? Well, black's doing that because if you take back with the bishop, which is what Jan does, which is logical, I think the most logical move. The reason it's logical is because you're redefending this knight here. When this pawn is taken with the attack on the queen, this is what's so crazy. Like, this level of calculation or like skill level is just beyond me. Like, I can barely understand it after watching like 4 recaps with like 4 different grandmasters and people like that. Ding is saying my action with my queen and bishop on your king over here and this knight and this pawn is so strong that I'm not going to move my rook. Instead, I'm going to sacrifice my knight. So now both my knight and my rook are sacrificing themselves. They look like they can both be taken, but you can't take both at the same time. And if you don't take the knight, your queen's dead. You know what I'm saying? So you have to take the knight. But if you take the knight, the pawn has been removed from the defense of the knight. Now the rook doesn't have to run away and block its own bishop, right? Like rook to here would be bad because then you can still follow it up maybe with a pawn move or a bishop move. Rook here is just the wrong direction because you're blocking your own bishop. The rook would much rather sacrifice itself for the bishop. So black sacks the knight for a pawn and then sacks the rook. Why? It's all to open up the queen against the king. And it's winning this knight because by undermining both the pawn and the bishop, by exchanging these 2 pieces for these 2 pieces, you're basically also winning this piece. So you're actually exchanging a rook and a minor for 2 minors and a pawn. So this minors are 3 and rooks are 5, pawns are 1. So you're exchanging the knight and the rook, which is 8, for 7. 7 plus the 1 point of compensation against the king, because this pawn is going to be difficult to defend. So, and you're also gaining time because white's wasting a move attacking a piece that is gladly going to sacrifice itself anyways. And it's been planning that the whole game, basically. So, black takes, brilliant move. Now, something that is just so far beyond me is that apparently it's better to take with the rook. Typically, in situations where you can recapture with multiple pieces, much more logical is to take with the less valuable piece so that when the rook sacrifices itself, it's doing so in a way that is losing the exchange, being down the exchange. Like exchanging a rook for a bishop is generally a bad idea because your rooks are more valuable in the end game. So, you know, if you take with the rook, well, you're just letting this rook bail out for equal value, basically. But the difference is in that variation, the knight is not lost. So by taking with the rook instead of the bishop, if rook takes, bishop can take, and now the bishop supports the knight, and there's nothing to kill the bishop, so the knight lives. So although you lost your rook, you saved your knight. So this is actually quite good, I would imagine, for white. Let me see. Is it going to show me? Probably breaking the computer. It's too complicated. Anyway, let's go back. Anyway, so rook here is actually pretty good if Ding goes through with it. But there's crazy variations if rook takes. Nepo goes with bishop takes, so we'll stick with that. Although why isn't this working? I just kind of want to know why this isn't working. Yeah, so let me go back, Stockfish. Let me go back to here. See how it says rook takes f4 is the top? Okay, no, it likes bishop, but I bet you if you let it think, see, rook is going to the top. So rook it takes f4 is the best, but then let's see what black's best move is. Because I don't think it's taking. Yeah, so in this, interesting. So yeah, rook takes, it doesn't even give rook takes f4 as an option. Because this is bishop takes f4, and then you've basically lost a knight and a rook for just a rook and a pawn. So you're just losing, and you're not winning this bishop. You're not winning this knight. You're getting screwed, basically. So that is why instead of rook takes rook, assuming the rook took the knight, black would have to play bishop takes because this rook is not a bishop, so it has no effect on the knight, which means that the queen and the bishop can win the knight with impunity because this rook isn't good enough to defend. It's just one defender, and the bishop hasn't yet arrived there. So now the bishop has won a knight, and you still can't really take the rook that is under attack. If you take the rook with the pawn, you're just losing another piece with this just train coming down on this diagonal. So bishop takes f4, bishop can't really take because the queen takes back, and now black is very comfortable here. This bishop's in God mode again, and black has no problems. So the rook just amazingly sits here. That's what's so complex about this. So bishop takes g6. Wow. See? Wow. Bishop takes g6. Okay. So if this is the mind-blowing stuff that's beyond me. If the rook takes, and the rook can't take back, and you can't take this rook, all these things have to be calculated. If the rook takes, Nepo had to have calculated if I take with the rook, Ding will take with the bishop, take my knight. So the knight is dead. This knight's dead and this knight's dead because this knight hopped in here to start all this after this c3 move, which is the critical line. So now white is basically saying bishop takes g6. And you might be like, what? Bishop takes g6? Why? Aren't you just losing a full bishop for that? And why did you do that? Well, now the funny thing is is now you can take the rook. Whereas before you couldn't, and I'll tell you why. It has to do with the queen on the H file. The bishop takes, forced H takes G. Now, real quick, what if black takes this way? Well, then you're blundering queen e6 check, which wins the rook because the king has to move. You're also winning the bishop. You're basically, you can't allow queen e6 check, which starts to just wreak havoc on your position. So you take with h pawn, no problem, right? Well, the problem is now I can take your rook, and you can't take mine. Because if you do, let me just turn this off because I understand it now. If and this is only with the sacrifice. And my computer's having a hard time. But I'll just show you. Black has just taken your rook after you took its. But now white has to move bishop f6, threatening queen h8 checkmate, and it's kind of unstoppable. Because this bishop has abandoned its primary responsibility, which is as a defensive piece guarding the king, because the bishop sack on g6. So now you see, again, the tactical richness. You know, it's unlimited. I mean, this is just all the major pieces are on the board, doing their best to make things interesting in this game. And so, anyway, if I play here, let me just show. It's mate in 6. So this is basically just unstoppable. So, getting back to the game, let's go to knight takes, bishop. So instead of rook takes and bishop g6 madness, taking the rook and then you take the knight and you can't take my rook and the queen comes and checkmates all this because the pawn moves, all this crazy stuff. Instead of that, Nepo just takes with the bishop, defending the knight for one more turn, leaving this knight alive, forcing rook takes bishop, and then bringing his rook up with ideas of rook h4, and maybe then you can attack the king. And once you check with the rook on h8 and the king comes up, the queen can come down, and then the king's forced out here, and then maybe a rook move attacking that, and maybe you win this rook or something. There's an attack, kind of. Not really, but kind of. But really, you're just recapturing a piece, but that is an idea, okay? But you're also walking into the line of fire, and this knight is going to be dropped. And as you can see, in this position, white has 2 rooks, 2 minors, and a queen, and black only has 2 minors, a rook, and a queen. So black is down a full rook. It's like basically missing a rook. But it has this bishop pair, and it's teamed up with the queen against the king, and against this knight, and against this rook, and there's no defending it, and it's black's turn, so black takes the knight. Now the attack rages on. Black is actually better here, in my opinion. Ding is an absolute genius. Now, if the clock times are accurate, Nepo, who moves very quickly, is in trouble here because he went for all this, h7 business, and it just Ding has just defended like a computer and sacrificed his rook in a genius way involving knight f4, and Nepo didn't play it correctly with rook takes. Instead, he took with the bishop, so he's in this awkward position. So he plays rook h4, saying, I'm just going to try to slam through on your king. And Ding is amazing because Ding does not care. He's just degaffing this pawn because he's saying my bishop will stop any checkmates or checks on h8. And if you sacrifice your rook for the bishop to stop the defense so that you can crash through after h7, it doesn't matter because my queen will recapture and also defend. So this is just permanently not an issue for this black king. The black king doesn't even play a move like h5. He just says, I'm going to move my rook out to here and attack your bishop. And now rook, he's basically defending against the threat. I mean, make no mistake, if you play a move like pawn over here doing nothing, then this does become pretty tragic for black. You're winning a pawn, and maybe the queen can sneak in here and get in here. In some situations, maybe the queen, once it's there, you can do sacrifices here and then take with the queen. And when you have the queen and the rook right here, that's GG. Also, a sacrifice, once the rook is here, a sacrifice on g6, now that I'm looking at it, it works because the queen would get killed if you try to take back. And if you don't, the queen can attack the king like in some sort of way. So it is a threat. I'm just saying it's not quite good enough of a threat to where you can't also get some action for your pieces. So Ding plays the brilliant move, rook attacking bishop. Now, if you play your caveman attack, it doesn't work because white's queen is overloaded because now black can sacrifice the rook for the bishop and you are under attack. You don't have checks because this bishop defends. And if you take the rook, winning the rook, you lose your other one. So black would be winning after rook takes h7. Black would be winning because of this brilliant move. Most chess players, they see this and they see this, and they are very one-dimensional in their thinking. Like, how do I add a defender to this? How do I, maybe I move up here, and then, that might lose to some ideas, but this is the best way. Defending by attacking. Tactical defense. So attacks the bishop. Now, it's not a threat unless black takes here. Otherwise, black can just keep its rook here, maybe move it back here and start. Well, that doesn't work because this bishop is really good. So what does white do? Well, white basically throws in the towel. White sees that he has no attack and that this bishop is far too powerful because moves like queen maybe someday teaming up. The bishop pair is just very strong. The rook is pressuring the bishop, preventing the queen from moving, preventing this rook from going up here. So white says, your bishop is too good. I have to give up on my attack and try to stop yours because the tables have turned. White used to be the one attacking with his bishop, but now it's very clear that black is the one who actually has a threat because the pawn on the f file is gone, and that can be useful in attacks, but defensively it sucks because now the bishop can maybe take this pawn and then check here, and you're under attack check. So maybe you don't have time for like a sacrifice here with a tactical defense from the queen. Also, basically just this diagonal is vulnerable to checks. Or any of those three checks from these two pieces. Yeah, I kind of forget what I was thinking there, but doesn't matter. White basically says, "Screw this. I'm gonna try to exchange bishops, and if you take, I'll get my stupid rook back into the center, and I'll pressure your bishop, and your god bishop will be gone, and I'll get a draw and whatever. Ding surprised me with this opening." Ding has the option here of ignoring the bishop, uh, not ignoring, but avoiding the bishop trade with bishop to a6, still exerting some pressure on the king. Like maybe one day the queen can deliver mate on this square if the rook is distracted. So the bishop would still be kind of in the game on a6. You are giving up your main diagonal to this bishop, but at least there's tactical possibilities. Instead, I don't mind this move at all. I don't think it's very good on a6. I actually don't mind taking. So when black takes here, but Anish Giri, the announcer, one of the announcers I heard was criticizing this move because tactically speaking, if you have a bishop pair and that's your compensation for being down a rook, you don't want to exchange bishops. But black is basically saying, I control this, and you don't get to block me, because if you block me, I'll take, and then I will play my rook up, reinforcing the bishop, so the bishop doesn't have to retreat, and you cannot play c4. If you play c4 to try to attack this rook, to then continue your double attack on the bishop and win the game on the spot, because where does this rook go? Well, there's an in-between move, which is check, which is why the king is just weaker without the f-pawn on g1. So this is a check, and if you take, black takes back with the rook so that the pawn can't kill it. And if you don't take, if you just move your king, well, now black can freely move the rook back and has this excellent piece here, and you didn't achieve anything as white. So c4 is a terrible move, because you're just giving the square to black. And so Nepo goes back to h4, basically saying, I admit I cannot attack this bishop. If it's me, I'm playing maybe queen here. Maybe, what is wrong with queen there? Oh, gotcha. Okay. So the queen is stuck. Where are we? The queen and the bishop of black attack h2. So the queen on h3 is stuck defending h2 because the king is an insufficient defender. So the queen cannot go here, threatening to triple up on this bishop, because the bishop has checks. So basically, Nepo's admitting, I can't attack you with my queen. I can't attack the rook, undermining the defense. So this bishop is here to stay. So although you have a rook and they have a bishop, the bishop is not dislodgeable. It's there to stay, and black has an extra pawn, and it's a pass pawn, and it's protected. And if black can play moves like f5 and attack this rook, and then start to move, black maybe backs the bishop up and starts to play here because it controls this square, then this pawn can become a queen down the line, or become a thorn in white's side. And then that opens up lateral defense of the queen. So yeah, but white goes here, basically re-instigating the threat that doesn't even help. Because all you're doing is winning that pawn, especially with the bishops gone. Now there's no sacrifices, so you're just winning a pawn, and you can never check the king and bother it. And you can't even sneak in with the queen and checkmate, because this bishop does such a good job. So this bishop is a pain in the ass for for white to deal with. So black is winning because a pawn and this bishop is worth more than this rook. So queen d6 here is it's a good move. It's basically teaming up the queen with the rook. So now the queen not only is a team with the bishop, making the bishop more powerful, it's also making the rook more powerful. The rook can threaten to come down here, and if you ever take back, now suddenly the queen is checking you. Where's your king going? Is it going here? Okay, but maybe the bishop is, going to be a problem. I don't know. So, white plays basically the only move and goes back with the queen. The other move is also going back, but with the rook. This move prevents some of the problems of maybe a rook. It also threatens. It reintroduces the idea of maybe if my queen is in front of the rook, it won't be as pathetic of an attack. Maybe the queen on h7 actually is kind of strong. So queens are better than rooks at attacking kings because the king can never really be near the queen, whereas with the rook on h7, the king is the one attacking it. Whereas a queen on h7, it's check, and the king has to run away, and the queen is not hanging if the rook gets distracted. So queen on h6 is an improvement. So here, h5 is played, basically saying you don't get queen h6 ever teamed up with this rook because the pawn is in the way. And this pawn chain with no light squared bishop to sacrifice is very strong. And the pawns on light squares control all the light squares. And that is very useful when you have a dark square bishop that can maneuver around them. So you want your pawns on the other square. If you only have one bishop, especially if it's by itself and your whole game plan depends on it, like this one, you want your pawns on the opposite color so you can control light squares with your pawns and dark squares with your bishop, or vice versa. So black has a fucking great position here. Now white plays the best move, g3, blunting the attack of this bishop, and you can't really like sacrifice because the queen can't come in because this queen actually defends that. So g3 is safe and solid and the best move. And you've gotten your queen out of there, so it doesn't block it. You're in your queen at all, so it's a good move. So now bishop to here is played, attacking this rook, kind of just seeing where it's going to go. Now the rook goes to c4. Now if it's me and I have my rook under attack like this from a bishop, and I'm playing this chess position, I'm going to a4 100 out of 100 times. Why? Because I'm attacking a7, and if I win a7, I'm attacking the 7th rank, and maybe I can start to check them on a8 at the right moment, and then maybe the queen, if the queen's here, sneaks in here, and then I have a rook over there threatening to come in like this, that's GG. So that's the only square I see. Nepo plays the absolutely spectacular rook c4, which is better because it permanently pressures c4 or c5, the pawn, the weakness of black, right? Black has this beautiful pawn chain over here, and the whole game he's had this weakness of his c pawn, and it hasn't been a liability until right now, where suddenly black's pieces become defenders instead of attackers. Because white has somehow turned, by blunting this attack and redeploying the queen to the center and kind of abandoning the h7 business because of h5. Now, instead of getting greedy, going for this pawn, white is tying down the c pawn, or the pieces to the c pawn. Because if black gets creative here with rook d2, trying to coordinate with the queen after a sacrifice like h4, which he does play in a sense later, if black gets distracted, white is winning this pawn. And when white wins this pawn, the c pawn, which black could have won earlier, but was worried about like bishop tactics with the queen defending it. If this, like, black had bigger problems than a pawn, but you know, if this pawn is not ever killed and this pawn is killed, well, then this pawn becomes a queen. It becomes a protected pass pawn, very hard to stop. And you see the flaw in black's position. So the good news for black is that you're already defending it twice. You can defend it a third time, and white cannot attack it a third time because if you play, b4, like let's just say black makes a move. If you play b4, black can always just take, and then the weakness is gone essentially. It doesn't really work there because in that situation the queen sees the pawn, but b4 is an idea, but um, generally speaking, in order to win a pawn, you don't want to let it kill one of yours on the way. Otherwise, it's not a pass pawn. Like if this happens, this pawn is not making a queen here because this pawn can stop it. So it's just not as scary. But anyway, black can win by or can maintain an advantage by redeploying the bishop back here and maybe swinging it around here with ideas against the queen and the king. And then also it can just kind of from here just be like a pharaoh kind of just overseeing everything. And also it can just dance. The king can kind of like start to come up and make little improvements. But Ding goes for, I think, a fantastic try, the best move in my opinion, h4. h4 is a pawn sacrifice because it's only defended by the bishop, and yet the rook and the pawn are looking at it. So you're basically sacrificing a pawn, and you're threatening to take here, which is inconvenient for white because then if white takes back, that pawn would be a weakness. The queen would be aiming at it. The bishop would be able to coordinate on that. And so you don't really want to allow a pawn sacrifice offering to keep going because generally speaking, it'll get more and more dangerous the further down the board it goes. So Nepo just takes it with the pawn, basically saying, my rook defends this, my pawn controls the square, I'm going to take, and now you can't take back because I will take the bishop with my rook. So why did you just sacrifice your pawn? Now this is a terrible move by Nepo in my opinion, and yet it basically wins him the game because of the time situation. In this situation, Ding has less than 10 minutes and Nepo has 12. So it's pretty close on the clock. And the way the World Championship works is you only have so much time. You have no increment, so no time gained per move. And you only have so much time before you lose. If you make 40 moves, like we're only on move 31. If you make 40 moves in 2 hours, I think they get 2 hours with no increment, then you get another hour added onto your clock. And then after that, you get like even more time, like per every move you make, you get like 30 seconds or something. So there's a bunch of time that you can get if the game is lasting 40 moves. But we're on move 31. We're already in kind of like an end middle game. And Ding has to move very quickly here in a very complicated situation. And he chooses the best move, but it took him 4 minutes to find it. And you'll see in this game, there's a lot of situations where black plays the pinnacle move, but it takes him like 20 minutes. Or in this case, time is relative, and 5 minutes out of 10 is like 50% of your time, if you want to look at it that way. So he spends half of his time on that move, his remaining time. And although it's the best move, it's an impractical decision because Nepo just takes back in a minute, doesn't think about it, just takes because he says, "How can this be bad for me? I don't see any checkmate on my king. Um, I've permanently opened up the H file for my queen. Maybe one day. Let's rock and roll." And now in this position, Ding only has one good move, and unfortunately, it's funny. He didn't find it, and he has 5 minutes and 39 seconds to make 8 moves and get to move 40, and then he gets like an hour at it, and it'll be fine, and probably winning with ideas like Bishop D8 and F5, and then marching this pawn down with the bishop redeploying this way. Um, that would avalanche the white position, but or you can just play your king up here and just say, I don't know what to do. White, what are you gonna do? And what can white do? White cannot add this rook to the attack of this pawn because black is so well defended on any sort of square. Like you'll notice there's no square available for the rook. The rook cannot attack through its own pawn. So how are you ever? And if this pawn's here, you can't win this pawn with the queen. And like I said, if you ever push this, you're getting rid of black's weakness. Although that might be like your only try with white. Like what is white going to do? White is just waiting to get killed by bishop here. And bishop here is deadly because now white's whole pawn chain defending the king has been removed just for the price of one pawn that wasn't doing anything. So in this situation, white is screwed basically because black is going to come down here, and then you're going to have the queen and the bishop attacking this pawn and the rook defended by the queen attacking this pawn. And only a king defends it. So you're basically fucked. And if you try to, like, in this position, so after the pawn sacrifice, if Ding immediately plays this, you're panicking as white because you have 10 minutes left. It's a world championship. You have the white pieces, but you're getting your ass kicked, and you're up in exchange, but your rooks are terrible, basically, like, compared to this bishop, which, is amazing, and it's in the center of the board, defended twice, and just attacking the king, right? So you have to defend this pawn because it's going to come with check as well. So let's say you play rook here, defending the pawn. Like, oh my god, I need to defend this pawn. I need to add a defender. Well, now you're opening the door for a rook infiltration, which checks your king. And now, if the rook tries to block, there's a move like this, renewing the threat. And then if the rook blocks like this, well, now this check is check, and it's actually defended by the queen and the rook. And so the rook is actually a lousy defender here because of queen takes, and that's game over, basically. So, suddenly this bishop is extremely, extremely dangerous. Now, in the game, it's so funny to me because for you to be able to see h4, opening up this diagonal, like the potency of this diagonal, and then not follow it up with bishop to here, it's just unreal that he missed this. I mean, this would have been an immortal game from Ding, I think, if he plays bishop e5 here. Instead, again, this is the complexities of chess. I don't blame him. He plays the immediate rook d2, which you see the computer is for the first time saying, what? I thought you guys were the best in the world. This move is not as good as the bishop move. Why? Because now white can block, and there is no bishop takes because the bishop is stupid. The bishop is not actually doing anything. It needs to be in the fight before the rooks have a Mexican standoff like John Wick and the what do they call him? The not the Mandalorian, but the Marquis. Like John Wick and the Marquis before they have the standoff. We need the Winston to be in position or whatever. I don't know. So if black takes here, white can take back. White is defending this pawn, which isn't even attacked twice because the bishop is not where it needs to be. And white has a rook, and black doesn't. And white is going to, team up on this pawn. And maybe black is forced into a defensive role. The rook is just going to be dangerous when there's no rook of black. But anyway, the bishop gets less and less good the more pieces are traded off. Because if the queens and the rooks trade, it'll just be rook versus bishop, and the white rook will win. But anyway, in this position, what the fascinating thing is black has 5 minutes here, and then basically can't find bishop. I don't know how he couldn't find this move. I think there is no point of there is no point of the sacrifice opening up this diagonal if you're not going to use it with your bishop. I guess he thought I'm already using it with my queen. Isn't this game over? But he didn't see that the rook can block. And here you can check the king, but the king can actually just move up, and it's defending the pawn, and you cannot go here because the queen and the rook actually would take that. Whereas before, the rook is actually playing a horizontal role here, defending this square, giving the bishop access to attacking the king. So that's what Ding miscalculated here, is he just ran out of time and then with less than a minute just played this move. Now, for the record, it looks logical. You're getting your rook on the 7th rank with the threat of checkmate, or at least check. And, the bishop's not absolutely dreadful here. It's attacking 2 pawns, and this rook's attacking 2 pawns. The queen is defending the rook and also attacking the king. So it's a logical-looking move. But after it's just blocked and completely neutralized by rook d2, Ding has to go back and defend his weakness. But in my opinion, Ding was not thinking defensively here and was just thinking about winning the game, because he knew he had played a masterpiece in the French defense that would go down in World Championship history if he had just played the right move. So instead, another move to consider is just check to get out of the rook exchange that you don't want. And then when the king moves, then just go back and defend your position. Like I said, reroute the bishop, f5 ideas, stuff like that. Instead, and for the record, the bishop doesn't need to do that. It can also go here. And you can also play the king up, defending the bishop. But I personally sometimes like the bishop rerouting. But anyway, so with 45 seconds left, he plays this move, and Jan just blocks it. Jan has 10 plus minutes, and then Ding here needs to avoid the exchange and doesn't do the check, doesn't go back and play defense and say, I admit it, I made the wrong move order. And you can still go back and then play the bishop and then come down again. But instead, he attacks the queen. And again, this looks logical because now you're attacking this pawn twice. Looks like you're winning the c-pawn because you're attacking the queen. You're defended by your own queen. You're getting out of the exchange, so you're accomplishing all sorts of things. The problem is, when you attack the queen, you have to ask yourself, where's it going to go? It's not going to just kill the rook and die. It's not going to stay where it is and die. So where's it going to go? And Ding didn't have a minute to calculate that with this rook abandoning the 5th rank, Nepo just takes the pawn and threatens a queen trade. And the game is over. The game is over because black is down a rook, and its justification for that was a monster bishop. But if your bishop is being timid back here, um, and the queens get traded, well, then the two rooks are just going to beat a rook and a timid bishop. And also, your advantage of this pawn being a protected passed pawn is neutralized by the other protected passed pawn if you're not winning the c pawn, which you're not, because the white queen not only gets out of the attack, it wins a pawn and defends its c pawn. So it basically comes down to this c pawn being a queen instead of the black c pawn being a queen. Is one way to view this catastrophe. And then, I mean, black never really should have been attacking here. Instead, should have been focused on the king. But now Ding is in desperation mode with no time. Throws in a check. Brings the queen down. Again, logical move. Attacking the rook with ideas of check. And then maybe checkmating. But white simply plays this great move. Instead of like bringing the queen back to try to like defend or something, white just plays this move, lining up an attack on the bishop and the king. And now black is seriously in trouble because his bishop is under attack. And if he moves it, this pawn gets loose. And so he plays king defending his bishop. And then this rook swings over, and that's good GG. Because now your bishop is not defended by your king, because two rooks is too much. The queen cannot defend the bishop, because both squares are covered by white pieces that are less valuable. And then also, if the bishop moves, which it does by queen goes here, defending the bishop, so that if rook takes, queen can take, something like that. Something like that. Or I guess maybe you take the queen and hope for maybe that's better. But it doesn't matter because Nepo, in this position, Ding resigned as soon as he played this. Because he realized, I'm not actually defending the bishop, and if the queen takes me, which I'm offering, now when the bishop recaptures, you've opened up the check, and there is a check, and when the king moves, there is another pawn dropping, and now white has two extra pawns and a rook for a bishop. So he's up, like 4 points of material. These pawns are doubled. But yeah. So Ding resigns after queen takes c3. And the game is over before he resigns because this double barrel, again, or whatever you want to call it, is too strong because it attacks both these things. And the king is a terrible defender, the worst defender in chess. Probably the queen is a little bit better. But the king is so valuable. The more valuable you are, the worse of a defender you are. That's why pawns are the best defenders, because they're happy to give themselves up for the cause of defense, whereas the queen wants to be able to attack. But anyway, it's GG, and it's all because of the poor placement of this bishop. If the bishop, after the pawn sack, even without the pawn sack, the bishop is good here, and or the king here. I mean, you have to leave this rook guarding this pawn, and you have to play bishop here. And if we look at the computer, black is winning in all variations. Not winning, but almost a pawn advantage in all best play of white. So instead, this position was never reached. But if it was, I'm pretty confident. If you gave Ding more time, he would have found it. And it's sad because I've played games like this where you outplay your opponent and you run out of time, and they beat you just because they moved faster and you just didn't get him in time. And it's frustrating, but that's chess. And Nepo is extremely optimistic and he plays extremely quickly. And that is his greatest weakness and his greatest strength. And in this case, it was a strength. But in last game, it was a weakness when Ding beat him because he moved too quickly on a lot of key moments. So if Ding can hang in there with the time pressure that Nepo's putting on him and just um, get his games going, reach the time control, I should say, like reach move 40. I think Ding is a great player, but truthfully, I think Nepo is better. I think the game of chess requires certain things that Ding doesn't have as much. I mean, Ding's world number 3 right now, so who am I to say like he's missing something? But generally speaking, I think to be the best, to win the world championship of something, you have to have a certain element of confidence or um, skill under pressure. And Ding clearly melted under the pressure of only having 10 minutes. He plays h4 and then doesn't even follow it up correctly and then just collapses by making 0 moves in the last 5 minutes. He made one move and then immediately blundered after the obvious reply rook d2, and then it was over. So he kind of crumbles under the pressure, whereas I don't see Nepo crumbling under the pressure. I see him just kind of getting frustrated and moving quickly and losing in a bad position. Like it's a different type of thing. It's not crunch time. It's just like I think Nepo gets better in crunch time. So I think that's what'll decide this match. I picked Nepo. Obviously, he's up 4-3 right now, so he should be the favorite. But even before the match, I thought he would be in control. Ding has never had the lead. Nepo took it, and then Ding has been tying him, and then Nepo will take it back, and Ding will tie him again. So it's going back and forth, but Nepo has been in the lead basically the whole time. Um, but fascinating game. Hope you enjoyed just the complexity of chess at the highest level. I know I didn't get all the variations right, but I do understand enough about chess to be able to, I think, explain what was going on in the gist of the game. And this is a beautiful position, but to Jan's credit, we never got that. We got this, and we got the defense and the blunder and the winning of the pawn. And this is actually um, like right here, white to move. It's GG because black just completely neglected this pawn. And pawns are important when you're down in exchange. You have to usually, if you want the bishop to be stronger than a rook, you kind of have to pair it with a pawn that can't be matched. And the fact that it can be matched makes this bishop all the more weak. And so there was some crazy idea of like the bishop coming here and checking the king and winning the queen and forcing the pawn to take, and then the queen can kind of come in here and with the rook checking and the queen coming down, it looks like the king might be in trouble, but it actually just runs away and survives. But anyway, the position we got was an attack on the rook and then a retreat and then a double attack on the bishop that is indefensible because if you retreat, you like if you play a simple move here like this, you're just losing to this. And if you play what he played, black just resigned here because it's white to move, and white is going to take the queen and then take the pawn when bishop recaptures. So the reason Ding resigned is basically this position, something like that. Black's just hopeless. But yeah, that is it. God bless.